Hey guys, I finally am getting to sit down and give you the update for Tessie's MRI, and it is really good news. And basically all of Tessie's doctors wanted her to have a second MRI. She had an MRI in like March or April of last year, and at the time I wasn't told anything. She had her first MRI and I didn't get any call or anything that anything was abnormal. And then I went to like a genetics appointment like a month later, and she didn't mention anything. She checked Tessie over and everything, and it was when she sent me her notes like a week later, and I was reading through the notes and I read in her notes that it said that they suspected that Tessie had a brain hemorrhage. And it said that they suspected that she had a brain hemorrhage, but they suspected that the brain hemorrhage wasn't clinically significant. And okay, I will admit that I kind of freaked out. And first I called the neurology number, and they didn't call me back after like 2 days when the neurologist hadn't called me back. Probably because it wasn't clinically significant, so he didn't feel like it was important to have to call me back. I don't know if he got the message and wasn't in the office or what, but no one called me back. So I called the pediatrician's office and was like, hey, saw this, kind of freaking out, and they explained to me that yeah, the radiologist suspected that there was a spot in her brain and that it was bright, and that they thought that meant that she had had some sort of a brain hemorrhage at some point in time, but that it was in a part of her brain, that produced spinal fluid, and it wasn't something that should cause her central apnea, and so they didn't feel that it was significant. So that was that. And then the next time it came up was when her doctor was kind of arguing with the pulmonologist about the cause of her central apnea, and this was in October, so about six or 7 months later. And I guess the pulmonologist said on the phone that he didn't really know that we couldn't really say for sure that her central apnea wasn't caused by what they saw in the MRI, which was the first time someone had said that, because I had asked that question a lot of times, and I'd been told a lot of times that that was absolutely not a possibility. And so I was surprised when our doctor came back and said that that's what they were saying. And then when she started having these episodes where she would have these little clusters where she'd stop breathing over and over and over and over again, and we would have a hard time waking her up, then everyone wanted us both to get the EEG done and to have a second MRI done where they could look at that same spot in her brain again. And that is when one of the other neurologists in the office called when I was driving Tessie to school one day, and when I stopped and talked to her, I found out that the MRI had actually been inconclusive. And she was vague when I asked what inconclusive meant, and so at Tessie's next doctor's appointment, at her physical for the MRI, I asked why she'd said it was inconclusive, and he brought it up and explained the whole thing and said that it was inconclusive because they didn't know for sure that she had a brain hemorrhage, that it could have been a lesion or something else, and that they could just see that it was a bright spot, and that they didn't really know what it was, that it was just a bright spot on her brain, and that was why they wanted her to go back and make sure that it wasn't something that was growing that was causing her to stop breathing. That was why we went back to the Children's Hospital, and that was why she had the MRI this week. And that was why I was so incredibly stressed out when they called and canceled that thing. It was like, seriously, oh my gosh, no. Like, I was ready to flip out. I mean, I was. I think my voice was, I'd been sick for like 2 weeks, and so you guys heard on a lot of the videos, if you were watching them, my voice was kind of scratchy sounding anyways, and I think that the nurse on the phone, I was upset. I think that they thought I was crying the whole entire time I was on the phone, which I wasn't, but it worked because I was pretty upset. I was close enough to crying that I just let everybody think that. So they got us in. And we had that day that was really, really hard, but we made it through, and Tessie was a champ, and she got that MRI, and we made it home, and we survived despite all the car trouble and everything else that happened. Her doctor called me the other day to talk to me because I had a question about his thing of we're not supposed to wake her up immediately when her monitor goes off, and we had an incident last week where she didn't start breathing on her own really quickly. In fact, it was a while before she started breathing, and I did have to wake her up. I did finally wake her up despite those instructions, and so I called and asked when exactly should I wake her up, because when I was supposed to record her also for the neurologist, and when I looked at how long it was on the video I made for the neurologist, it was longer than I felt like it should have been. Like, it was longer than I thought it was when I took the video for the neurologist. She's totally fine, but it was just surprising to me, because in your head it always feels like it's a long time. It feels like it's a long time when it's 10 seconds. Anyways, so I called him, and he said that usually he would tell a parent to wake the child after like 23 or 25 seconds, which her alarm goes off after 20 seconds. So basically, if her alarm goes off and I get up and walk in there, it's time to wake her up. So that does kind of change things. I mean, that basically means that as soon as her alarm goes off, we're supposed to be waking her up anyway. I mean, we're at the time limit where he would suggest waking her up anyways. But back to the MRI. He called for us to have that conversation, and we had that conversation. And as we were talking, he said, "Oh wait, look, I just gotten her MRI results." And he brought them up and looked at them, and it was perfect because he is the doctor that I would want explaining them. He was the doctor that explained when inconclusive results meant, and if there was one of her doctors that I could have explaining things to me, it would be him. And said that the second MRI said that the bright spot on her brain was still there, but it was less bright this time, and it hadn't grown. And so that was good. That means that it hasn't gotten worse, and that it has actually improved. So they think that it probably means that Tessie had a brain hemorrhage before she was born. This part was explained to me by our neurologist because Maggie had a neurology appointment, and when I went in there, he said, "Did you know we got the MRI?" And he went on to explain that it probably meant that some of the little brain vessels in that part of the brain had basically had a brain hemorrhage before she was born, and that's basically what had happened. But it's not in the worst part of the brain for it to have happened in, because it's the part of the brain that it happened in is the part of the brain that already produces spinal fluid, so it's already filled with fluid. So I guess if you're going to have a brain hemorrhage, that's not the worst place for it to happen. At least that's how her doctors have explained it to me the times we've talked about it. So it was really good news, because it wasn't a lesion and it wasn't a tumor, which was apparently the two things that everybody was worried about and not really saying up until that point, other than her doctor kind of letting it on when I really, really, really bugged him about it and asked what inconclusive meant. That was really, really good news. And it doesn't really give us any answers about why she has central apnea and why she's stops breathing in her sleep. I think our only real chance at getting any sort of answers now are with the genetics clinic, and that's we went for genetics testing, and they took a sample of blood from Tessie and from me and a sample from Paul and sent it off back in, I can't remember if it was March or April. I think it was April. I figured it out that we should be getting the results back probably in September. So whatever 6 months before September was. I looked at my calendar the other day and I can't even remember now, because it should be about 6 months. And we've had genetic testing before with Maggie, but it wasn't as specific as the testing they're doing with Tessie. With Maggie, the description that they gave us was, and if you had genetic testing done, this probably sounds familiar, was like, the way they'll usually describe it was like your chromosomes are like encyclopedias on a shelf, and each one is an encyclopedia. With Maggie, it was like they opened it up and they made sure every page and every line was there, and with Tessie, they'll be making sure every word is there. I think that was the way they described it to me. So they're going more specific with Tessie, and they're also testing something like an additional 20,000 proteins that are specifically known to cause problems or cause different syndromes. And so that is pretty much what we are waiting to hear back on now. And after going through genetic testing once with Maggie, I'm not like super optimistic that we're going to find out anything, but at the same time I'm also curious to see if they find anything. Because after the roller coaster we've been on with the last year with her, it would be a relief to find answers, but I guess answers like that wouldn't really change anything, so it doesn't really matter unless they were answers that would help her keep her monitor. And that actually was probably the biggest thing. I did show her neurologist the video that I made of her not breathing. I explained to him the concern about losing her monitor, and he asked some questions about the sleep study, and he said that if the insurance company pulls her monitor and takes back her monitor, he's going to have her readmitted to the pediatric intensive care unit again for monitoring, so that they can try to figure out what it is that causes her to stop breathing again, which is something that we already did once. And basically I think that would basically be for a 24-hour EEG again, and hopefully not more than that, so that they can see if they can see her have one of her spells there. Basically it would be whether or not she was having a bad day, like the bad days she has had during some of her sleep studies, because she has had some of those in the hospital. It's just if her last sleep study wasn't one of those, then she's in danger of losing her monitor, unless her last one was, because her last one was good, she's in danger of losing it. So far, it hasn't happened, and I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed that somehow it doesn't happen. I don't know. Anyways, that's the latest. But the MRI news was super, super good, especially now that I actually understand what it was that the concern was. Now to get to editing, because it is already very late here. Anyways, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that bell, and we will see you guys tomorrow.